be chairing tonight's meeting. The event is being live streamed on YouTube, and members of the public and media are welcome to watch the meeting remotely and listen to discussions taking place. Now I'd like to welcome you to Committee Room 1 at Coaston Town Hall and everyone watching on YouTube. Before we proceed with the meeting, I would ask everyone present to please make sure your mobiles are on silent or switched off, and we will start with 72 seconds silence to remember those who lost their lives in the Grenfell tragedy. Starting with apologies of absence. Apologies of absence has been received from Councillor Roberta Levy-Stearns, and I think Mona Ahmed is on her way. Declarations of interest. Do any members have any interest in that?
Thank you.
The minutes of the meeting held on the 18th of June 2025. The minutes of the previous meeting have been circulated. The committee agreed that they can be signed as a correct record. Thank you. And moving on to the annual Safeguarding Adults Executive Board report. This is the annual report of the Safeguarding Adults Executive Board, produced in accordance with statutory duty to publish yearly a report which includes the business plan for the year and any safeguarding adult reviews. Eileen Buckton serves as chair of the board, and I'm pleased to welcome her here tonight to present the report. We'd also like to welcome on behalf of the committee our thanks to Professor Joel Nanfort and the Policy Institute of King's College London and her independent expertise and input on key safeguarding issues in advance of the meeting. So I think it's Eileen and Louise Butler back in today to present. So do you want to start by speaking to the report?
Thank you, Chair. I will introduce the report. I certainly won't go through it section by section, but obviously we will welcome kind of comments and questions and discussion afterwards. But just a few points that that I would just like to make by way of an introduction. Firstly, I think you will see in the report that we have again this year really focused on community engagement work and our work with local communities to really get across the message about safeguarding. And I know at this committee I have talked to you about the importance for us of getting that work really firmly kind of embedded. So I'm very happy that we have had another year with that as a very key focus. As we've moved throughout the year, you will see that the report starts with, and I think we put this in because I think it's an example of actually working in local communities of somebody who changed some of the work that we were undertaking in the community because she felt from her own perspective that she wasn't able to kind of access the information that we were making available because of neurodivergent issues for her that made her difficult. And we realised that this was something that we hadn't taken on board, but we've been working, with various kind of community groups and responding to what they were saying. And it really made us kind of stop and think about actually, however much you do this work, you have to always just take account of other needs, other kind of perspectives, other kind of important areas. So we started the report Jackie Story. She has now become an ambassador, safeguarding ambassador, and she is also very involved now in looking at all. And she looked at the annual report and looking at all of our kind of reports to make sure that we have taken on board the issues that she raised. So we thought that was an important way to begin really, in terms of the annual report. You will see lots of kind of examples of the community development work and events that have taken place, but also I think some kind of evidence in the videos that we've been able to produce and in some of the kind of meetings that have taken place of the impact and the importance of the work that we've undertaken in relation to language, which isn't just about making sure that we translate into other languages. It's about translation with understanding. And one of the things that has come across to me during the year in the kind of meetings that we've had with community groups and their representatives has been really, really getting to grips with what the concept of safeguarding means for different people, different groups, different communities across both Drivers, but particularly tonight, affecting communities in Littleton and Chelsea. And I think that's been a sort of important lesson for us as well in the work that we've undertaken. So you will see, I think, throughout the report, the evidence of that sort of community embedding, in understanding safeguarding and taking safeguarding forward and making it everybody's business. We then started in this year's report. We've often left the data to the end of the report, so we brought it right up front this year because we wanted to put a message across really that data has become very important to us in terms of working with our partners and how we're understanding data and how we're responding to data in terms of the kind of priorities that we set. The most significant thing about the data, I think, this last year is that you will see there has been an increase, quite a marked increase actually, in safeguarding referrals. There has been, however, an increase in the number of referrals to adult social care, and we think that the result in the rise for safeguarding is because of that overall rise in referrals. And when we've looked across London and elsewhere, that is a picture everywhere. It's not something that's just taking place in this borough. It's in general that referrals are going up, and also safeguarding kind of concerns are going up as a result of that. So that is a significant change, I think. Some of the other data, I think, remains quite similar to last year, but we can certainly take you through that if you wish us to do so. And the other thing I would say is that there is a lot in this report which we are pleased about. We have worked for a number of years since the adult safeguarding governance structures were set up to work as a kind of a body itself, to work as a partnership group, but also to recognise that the work we're trying to do is also to influence the work that takes place in individual organisations, so that you will see here that there's a lot of examples of pieces of work that individual organisations have taken away from the discussions and learning that have been taking place within the partnership to do some work in their own agencies. I mean, so for example, there is an example in here about some work that the Royal Marsden did, which was based on the learning that came out of the SAR that they felt, actually, we need to go back and look at this in our own organisation. So we very much encouraged that and wanted to reflect that in the report. And in the kind of later sections of the report, we've highlighted for you the learning and development events that have taken place, but some of them and around kind of specific issues. So a whole range of issues that have both been raised by the community, but also by agencies as part of the partnership. So that's just to give you a sort of overview of the report itself. But we're very happy to take any questions or thoughts. But
thank you very much, Eileen, and thank you for this report. I think it was excellent and really reflects the depth of the partnership working with the borough and the commitment to keeping residents safe. which was obviously recognised in the outstanding CQC assessment table too. So I just wanted to open up, start with, and see who wants to ask questions.
I do. Thank you so much for your report. I would just like to ask, how are digital exclusion and isolation, meaning older people, being addressed in safeguarding risk? I think that's in a number of ways, actually. Digital exclusion is something that we very much recognised during COVID, and we've had that at the kind of forefront of the work that we do in terms of community engagement, which is why we have continued to have in-person events in terms of reaching with local communities, as well as having everything available digitally, because we recognise that was an issue, and it was an issue that the ambassadors raised with us as a result of COVID, and how some of them felt during COVID and afterwards. So digital exclusion has always been something that we feel that we need to address in how we put our messages across. So we do a variety of ways in which we kind of communicate. So, for example, in the recent work that we've done around translation of safeguarding messages, some of those have been leaflets, as well as something that's digitally available, and making sure that also those leaflets are put in public places, so in libraries and the GP, the surgeries, all of those places. So we very much work with that in mind. And then I think the other area of work that we are focusing on, and really it has come from the community, and again I think that some of this came out during COVID, is the fear that people had about digital abuse of all kind of different kinds. And you will see kind of outlined in the report some examples of that came up from our ambassadors, of things that they were picking up from community organisations that were of huge concern. So it remains a really important component of the work that we undertake, and particularly in the kind of community engagement work. And we have had really good kind of buy-in from our kind of partners across the sort of partnership in taking this work forward. So the piece have been very helpful in working with community organisations around some of their concerns. We've had other council services who've been involved in work around scams. We've had health partners making sure that they're taking on board some of the lessons that have been learned, and making sure they're getting those kind of messages out. So I feel that we've had a really good sort of commitment from all the kind of agencies across the partnership. So it is very key to the work that we do, and something that we're doing.
And also, just another question, Chair. Thank you. And how effective has the BAME Safeguarding Network been in shaping frontline practices and reporting outcomes? And do you have any case studies?
So are you talking about the BAME Safeguarding Network? Yeah. Well, so the work that we've been doing in the year of this report was very much setting the kind of networks up, and actually kind of getting a whole range of kind of communities involved, and looking at what some of the issues were, which is why that led us to the work of actually doing the translation work, because that was seen as a real kind of barrier. And then in the translation work, one of the things that was very poignant for me was one of the interpreters who said, but actually when I saw something translated into my own language, I didn't understand it, because it was the concepts that were difficult, as well as the language itself. And so we've had to do some quite painstaking work, really, of working at, really kind of back to basics about how do you get the kind of understanding of safeguarding that is very differently understood, from different kind of cultural experiences. So I would say the focus of the work that's in this report for the year that ended in March has been about building that infrastructure. In this current year, we are now beginning to look at some of the kind of impact of that. And some of the groups have actually been just recently making a video of the discussions they've been having about how they're exploring those issues. And so we will much more move into what the impact has been and the kind of impact on those particular communities. But so there's less of that. I think there's less of impact in this report. It's more about that was the year of building the kind of infrastructure and the understanding actually, because I think for us we realised actually these are really new areas of work, for us all, and we need to listen and learn and think about how we're going to take this forward. What's our thinking?
I think one of the things I'd just like to add is that every single meeting we have with the BAME network is so well attended, and I think that's something we need to actually say that's a really positive point. The other thing is the fact that they are leading on what they would like us to do with them. It's very much a collaborative process. It's using all those co-production words, and they are absolutely leading on it, and we are supporting them to do that. And I think you're absolutely right. The impact we can't yet measure the impact, but one area in particular which we'll begin to look at is something around discriminatory abuse and intersectionality, and getting them to support us in doing that. So I think that's something you can measure. It's quite a raw measurement, but that's something we can measure. We are seeing an increase in that area, but it's a very complex area, and they're supporting us in that piece of work.
Thank you. To Jared.
Thank you. Thank you for this report again. It's an excellent report. And just touching on the ambassadors, which I know something you worked hard on over the years. Just one observation and then a question really. The observation is there's only 2 men on it. Is that a challenge? Do you need more men on it? Just wondered why that is the case.
Well, the ambassadors are a group, as you know, that have been established for some time, who came forward from their organisations, and there definitely have been community organisations that have had more women involved. So, and we absolutely do encourage men's involvement. So I think it's been very important. Some of the key ambassadors who are men have been really important, I think, in picking up on issues and having a different kind of perspective. So it's something that we've absolutely encouraged to make sure that we've got diversity. But a lot of community organisations do have more women who are active in those organisations. So it is something that that we have to work out to make sure that we have got.
There are any other areas that we look at how maybe men are less willing or less comfortable coming forward, either to raise issues of safeguarding or to get involved in it. Yet they are groups that need representation.
And certainly in some areas of safeguarding as well, I think, Councillor, as well. I mean, certainly in the kind of mental health field,
yes,
where you want to actually have messages that are put across by men for men. I mean, there's a lot of different, in terms of national campaigns around those issues, and we definitely want to make sure that is the case locally as well. So it is something that that we will continue to kind of work towards, that we do have the full range of voices.
And just on the appendix at the back, where you've got the membership of the board, the membership that page at the back, there's no faith groups there. I just wondered what work you do with faith groups and how they're really useful conduit to communities. And I know faith groups are very focused on safeguarding. And I just wondered whether we're missing an opportunity to connect with faith groups that will take us into communities.
I was going to say they're definitely represented. Faith organisations are very much represented in the kind of the BAME Safeguarding Network, but in other kind of community organisations as well. And on the board itself, we tend to have representatives who represent the kind of voluntary sector and faith organisations as a whole. But again, we are always conscious that we want to make sure that we get the messages where people are, and faith organisations are really important in that, really important. So that is something that we will continue to sort of focus on as we take the community engagement work forward.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for this report. Really, really excellent. The questions I have really were about this dramatic increase in the demand, certainly from the point of view of things like domestic abuse. something like a 74% increase in domestic abuse referrals, and numeric referrals increased by 112%. And I was just wondering how confident you feel in being able to meet that level of demand, sort of that increase in such a short space of time, and whether there needed to be kind of extra capacity building to address that. And yeah, I guess it's a conversation, separate conversation as well, but it seems to be happening at such a scale, and why that is.
There has been an increase post-COVID in terms of those referrals, particularly in relation to domestic abuse. What I do feel though is that I think there is now a really strong partnership between the Adult Safeguarding Board and the other partnership organisations across both boroughs. That's very multi-agency, but also means that the different partnerships actually do talk to one another and communicate well, so that actually what we have is not just the kind of the safeguarding partnership itself and the people who work as, specifically in terms of safeguarding. There are the much wider community safety partnerships and a whole number of other partnerships, I think, and partners that we are working with. So I think we're widening the groups of people that we work with. It's not just in the community, but across agencies as a whole, which is how you then build your capacity to be able to to deal with advances. Do you want something like this done for itself?
So all I was going to say is the fact that, if you remember 3 years ago, we actually remodelled the whole of our safeguarding structures, not only operationally, but also strategically. And one of the reasons we did that is because we wanted to future-proof the systems and the pathways in place in anticipation of an increase in the older age group, which we know we're in now, and that's what we're seeing. And this is exactly what we're seeing. So we feel reasonably confident that, in fact, that having done that work and having done the remodel, not only at an operational level, we also reviewed it strategically at a board level as well. So we are well placed to manage the demand. Not going into the detail too much, but just to say our conversion rate, which means as the safeguarding concerns come in, they're then triaged and triaged. Our conversion rate is always roughly the same, about 33%. So it means that it's slightly higher than the national average. So we are taking things seriously, but at the same time, we are making absolutely certain that our front doors are still monitoring, reviewing, and making sure that they're signposting as a very strong prevention of what we do.
Thank you. Thanks. Can I just ask one more question about, there was something in the report about concerns around the use of Mental Capacity Act in dolls and changes to dolls. And I was just wondering if you could just say a little bit about that, and how I think there was something around the lack of confidence around use of the Mental Capacity Act. And just expand on that a little bit, and if there's anything that
I'll explain and perhaps you said something about yes, I think that the use of the Mental Capacity Act has been something that we have been concerned about for some time, in that it is really, really important that we keep focus on it and continue to kind of help staff across all agencies in their use of the Mental Capacity Act. We've always undertaken training. We've always looked at our practice and across kind of agencies and had those discussions at the partnership board. But what we have been doing more recently is actually doing some multi-agency case audits, which is something that they use much more in children's services, but we've brought it into the kind of adult partnership world of actually being able to do multi-agency audits. And we're really pleased about kind of focus of that work, because it's led us to a much kind of greater understanding of bringing practitioners together. Because what's important is to really impact on frontline staff, because they're the ones who are trying to make kind of decisions and make decisions on the spot in terms of the kind of relationships they're building and how they're working. And it's important that they understand that the legislation and how best to use it. And then, so we've been doing kind of case audits to help frontline practitioners, but also to widen the understanding about mental capacity across a range of departments. So not just those who are involved in social care and health, but also, for example, housing colleagues. So the work that we've done with housing, so that kind of housing officers themselves understand something about mental capacity, even though they're not making the decisions about it, that they have an understanding of it. So it then kind of impacts on our work, for example, around audit and self-defence. So we're trying to kind of widen the understanding across different partner agencies where that's appropriate, as well as reaching down to make sure that we continue to have the kind of impact at a kind of operational level, because that's so important. Did you want to say something about that?
Should I say something about DOLS? So DOLS is one of the most legalistic processes that we have, and the Mental Capacity Act plays a really important role in that. In fact, the DOLS team is very well placed in terms of managing it. We still have no backlog, which is, I'm very proud of that they really get on and do it. The difficulty we have is that this is a national decision to review the Mental Capacity Act. Mental Health Act trumps it, and as we know, that's under review at the moment. Actually, at this moment in time, the government are actually reviewing once again the Liberty Protection and Safeguard process, because it's time intensive and it's pretty expensive as well to run. We just manage the demands. I think other boroughs are in not such a good position as we're in, but as I said, we got rid of the backlog and we have a mixed model approach. And I'm providing assurance here that in fact there is no issues there, but we are watching very keenly at the latest legal case that's actually at the moment going through the law courts at the moment over in Ireland, to actually see what's going to happen next. And it's been a ongoing area of not of concern, but an ongoing area which we just need to keep an eye on, because it is so needless.
Thank you for your work. I have a focus on the autistic people on page 141. I mean, maybe Lisa remember that we worked together on a complex case in my ward, so it was an area of interest for me. And I was quite interested by the fact that there is a significant increase from the previous year, and I was curious to understand, why do you think that is? Or is it because this is the first time that you've included the autism in the report, or if there is something more systematic? And another question linked to that point, which is extremely relevant for my ward, is how, given the focus on the autistic people, how are you going to work with the children's service? Because some of those cases that are identified early on, and then they move on to obviously adults, and that's where it's complex. So that's, I guess, two questions really.
So this is the first time that we have included this, and we're very pleased that we've worked with health partners to think much more about the data we would like them to share, and to kind of work with that, in not just with their health colleagues, but across the partnership as a whole. So we absolutely welcome this. And in fact, as it happens, Louise and I were in a meeting this morning where we were talking about just this issue, about the links with children's services and how we look at the different routes and directions that are available for young people as they come into adulthood, and the need to start very kind of early, where there are young people who are being worked with, where we know of a diagnosis and what happens then when they move into adulthood, and realising that we really need to look at each group of young people and their journey into adulthood, and how we think about that, and how we kind of give guidance for workers both in children's and in adults, and how do they learn from one another in terms of taking that work forward. So it's very kind of pertinent. We're actually having this discussion at this current time. Just today.
And do you have an idea why there is significant increase, Southwood? Is it just a not data, or is it do you see a systematic trend, or is there something more for it was just a data blip because that happens like that? Or I mean, because for hoarding, for instance, I remember we discussed that last year, and there was definitely an increase post-COVID, post-isolation of the lockdown. So I was just curious to see if you had identified something.
The numbers have increased nationally.
Oh, it's
Yeah. Which
okay.
so I don't think it is something that is local. That is national. I think it's something that is to do with better diagnosis.
Okay, yeah.
Okay. And you know, we welcome that, and obviously want to kind of work on that and build on that. And so better diagnosis, but also I think early diagnosis.
Oh yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So I just wanted to thank you for your work as well. I mean, this is not easy work, and I can only imagine that there are times when you know you're really facing some difficult cases, and you know I just want to kind of acknowledge that. And actually, what I wanted to ask you about is a little bit leading on from what Mona was asking about the challenges ahead and the more demand. And you know, one of the things we have this weekly surgery, and actually I was thinking about this before we had our surgery, and more now we're getting housing cases, people in TA, and they're coming and they're at the work, they're going kids there. And there was this lady who came, and she's been in about 10 or 15 temporary accommodations in the last 10 years. And I just kind of, having read this and thought about this, I kind of looked at her and thought, how will you ever find her? How can we ever support somebody like this, where really she couldn't even remember where she would be living? I mean, it was really heartbreaking, and I just felt like, how do you find these people and how do you support them? The really challenging ones.
I think what I would say is that for us, housing probably is one of the most kind of important developing relationships in the safeguarding arch, and we started doing a lot more work with housing colleagues around a whole number of issues. I mean, we started on the as you said, on the kind of hoarding and sound effect, but we very much moved on from there, and we've been looking at, you know, we have a new duty now in relation to our sleeping, but also we're beginning to look at kind of issues of temporary accommodation. I mean, they are particularly prevalent, obviously, in children's services, but there's also an aspect of how in the adults' world that we support parents in those situations in terms of, you know, thinking family, and also I think for vulnerable adults who find themselves homeless, and how to make sure that there are a kind of range of services that are available to them. So the work that we are engaged in is looking at much better, you know, identification and risk assessment of those people who are most vulnerable. And I think there is far closer working across both councils. They have different kind of systems in place, but I'm kind of confident and assured about this very close work between adult social care and housing to make sure that people go through the net, that people are kind of recognise that their need is recognised. And what I want to see happen is to make sure that that is also supported by the wider multi-agency partnership in safeguarding. So it supports what the two councils are doing. So our work with housing, I mean, there is some of in this report, because obviously this was last year, but this current year, our work with housing and developing areas with housing is really good. Because we all know that, again, it's not just a local thing, but nationally there is so much kind of demand and you know, difficulties around kind of housing allocations and housing availability, and we need to make sure that for those people who have housing needs, that we make sure that, you know, they have available to them the whole range of kind of services that support them if they're vulnerable. And that's, you know, good communication, good systems, good strategic overview across those services, and then making sure that's also represented at the partnership level.
And also then they're often, I mean, there are residents, but they're not in the borough. So, I mean, it makes it even harder, right? Because they're you know, they're scattered everywhere and they're not in one place. So and they move a lot as well. So,
and this is one of the things that is being discussed with council actually, is that not just kind of in our boroughs, but also across London. There's quite a lot of kind of discussion between safeguarding chairs, but also other kind of organisations as well, to make sure that there are agreed ways so that people don't just get placed and information isn't then kind of provided about them. That when the borough places that.
Can I jump in and ask a question? It's what I was thinking of, and Professor Manifold spoke about, but just how do we maintain safeguarding outside when we have residents who are placed out of borough? Because obviously that one's become much harder. And one of the council that she referenced was Camden Council and the work that they were doing in terms of trying to bring people back. I think it was called the Bring Back Home, which I appreciate it's much harder when you don't have homes and places to put them, but just what oversight do we have, I guess, when people, from what Anne's saying, are moving out to the borough, and that's where you don't have space in.
And I think that's why the making sure that there's kind of protocols about information sharing and risk kind of assessments is really, really important, which is why we are focusing on this work, and also talking to other boroughs about the work that they're doing. And then, you know, if boroughs are working on bringing people back, then they have their kind of prioritisation around that. For us, what's important is to make sure that we don't lose sight of people when they aren't placed, you know, somewhere else. So there is kind of cross-borough working, and there has been one or two SARS or safeguarding reviews where a theme has been that, you know, where cross-borough working wasn't good enough, and where that not here but elsewhere, that we've been able to learn from those SARS and look at them in a bit more detail about what we need to do. So it's very much on our agenda. And also, I think the other areas, it's not just in housing. I mean, the other areas that I'm really assured that the work that is undertaken here of when people are placed in care homes that are out of borough, or other, you know, other kind of supportive accommodation. Yeah. That there is the same reach in terms of.
That was one of my questions, yes, in terms of actually, supported living, which I feel like the grey exit doesn't have the same sort of CPC framework, and so how are we tracking the risk and kind of ensuring consistency across providers when essentially people can be just as vulnerable who are living in that type of accommodation, but we don't necessarily have the same type of checks.
And that's why I think those issues about you know, the assessments that are undertaken and the quality of those assessments, and being assured about that, and we do get those assurances brought into the board, and, you know, for those who commission those. Yeah. Those who commission those services. So I think that's another aspect that's as important in terms of people being placed out of the borough, as well as
yeah, I mean, I guess my observation is I see the increasing need just from the residents that we need to see, and I just think that's like the biggest challenge that we have. Yes, well, as a council, for sure, the work we need to do, just because when you have that housing insecurity, you may get quite vulnerable quite quickly, I think, and it really affects your mental health. You to not have somewhere stable to be, and there's just more and more of it, sadly. So, yeah, I think that's a lot of challenge coming up.
And we absolutely right.
I'm just going to ask a couple of questions about you. One of the bits I just wanted to focus on was training and workforce development, which are fundamental to how effective safeguarding was, is and that you have a really well established learning and development program, which is very encouraging. The report tells us, basically my question was just about assurance of how confident are we that training is reaching everyone it needs to get to. The quality is consistent and that it's driving genuine behavioural change on the ground.
This was something that that we really wanted to focus on, not just this last year, but the previous year as well, which is why we have developed the SARM champions.
Yes.
Which is being that in every kind of organisation that we have somebody who is named and has the responsibility for making sure that the learning is cascaded, that it's kind of reaching the front line, and that kind of there's a link back to us if that is not the case, so that we don't just rely on what people tell us about the trade, but we do have some kind of assurance process in place to make sure that that is the case. And that one of the other reasons why we ask individual organisations to come back to us, and we reflect some of it in this report, with what they have done. Where did you know, when we had that SAR, when there was that learning, whether that was a SAR in the borough, when you got kind of learning from somewhere else, what did you do with it? You know, give us your example, give us the evidence. So it's not just that people went on a training course and they found it useful. It's then, well, what did you do with it? What did you change within the organisation? Or what evidence do you have back from your staff on the front line that this has made a difference? So we've absolutely built that into our training evaluation, and we'll continue to do so. It's really, really important because it's not enough. That's right. Yeah. 27 people attended, and they all said it was very good. Well, that's good, but it's not good enough.
One of my questions is going to be: are you seeing some significant training gaps in, say, for example, housing providers or the voluntary sector that are kind of coming out that you feel are a concern, and sort of how do you close those gaps and encourage?
The training in the voluntary sector is, that's part of the kind of community engagement, community development work, really. That what I would say about training overall is that you're never done. You know, it's sort of you run some courses and you run kind of reflection sessions where people, practitioners come together and they talk about their learning. But people leave and new people come into organisations, and that happens in the voluntary sector as well. So you just have to keep at it the whole time, and then you have to constantly review what's coming up for people, what's coming up for staff, what's coming up for organisations. Which is why we had to do that kind of listening with the Black Safeguarding Network, really, about the interviews that were coming up then, that we went to assumptions about that, but that we were very much focusing on what's important. So I think it's about making sure that you continue to find new ways and find ways of delivering training in much more effective ways.
Yeah.
And having a kind of variety of the ways in which you train, that some of it's online, some's in person, some's in small groups, some might be through supervision and impacting on kind of supervision in agencies across the board, that that you really sort of reflect different ways of doing it, but that you're also receptive to what are the new issues coming up for you.
Yeah. And on that note, well, I don't think you had romance fraud in the report last year. That was one of the areas we were looking at in our meeting beforehand. And I mean, I was just wondering, how are you identifying those sort of residents potentially most at risk, that type of use, and reaching out to them? And have you seen progressive effects in that outreach? And I guess how do you kind of close the gap in knowing that you are reaching when they're probably quite a difficult group got in package.
I think that comes from having such the development perspective, but a community kind of engagement perspective, which has to be about listening, and then responding. Which is why it's quite the work takes a long time. It really does take a long time to build trust and to build the kind of relationships and start to understand what the issues are. It would be so easy to go into organisations and say, well, here we are, we've got a training programme, this is what you need to know about safeguarding and you know, and deliver it. Whereas I think what we're trying to do is to really kind of listen and engage with, you know, what are the issues that are impacting on people, and how do we then begin to kind of formulate some sort of response, is what I'd say is a general way of how we try to identify gaps, try to identify new routes. I don't think we should share.
Well, interesting enough, so it was the safeguarding ambassadors who'd gone into their communities and they'd had a meeting and they were discussing what it is they would like to know more about. And the match board came up, being an area which they said that they were aware that certain members of their communities, quite a few communities actually, had experienced it. They didn't know who, but they knew that through the gossip mongering that this was a problem. So they're the people who want to know more about this, so that then could understand it, get to understand a bit more, and then go back out to the community and raise awareness. So in answer to the question, it is incredibly difficult. There's so much shame attached to it, least of all the fact you might have lost an awful lot of money as well. But that is why Mansfield is there, and that's because it came to us via our safeguard ambassadors who knew it was taking place in many different communities.
And I suppose that what I'm saying is that what lies behind that is that we must be kind of really vigilant that we do respond when issues come forward like that. Because actually when it did, I mean, we were like, we were like, what? Everything. So you know, and you realise that no, this is obviously of some real kind of concern, and we need to listen.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm trying to get across. There's a process as well as, you know, being receptive to the issue themselves, and then really.
Thank you, Jared.
Thank you. On the safeguarding audit reviews, if I'm reading this right, so there were 5 referrals of 4 didn't meet the criteria. That seems a bit odd. So is the criteria wrong? Is it too high? Is it too low? If you've got a system, but most of the referrals to the system don't meet the criteria of the system, I'm just wondering, just raised thoughts in my mind.
I think,
or am I reading the data wrong?
No, you're not reading the data wrong, so that's right. The reason for it is that a full safeguarding review is quite a lengthy piece of work. It's quite a costly piece of work because you often get some kind of independent perspective, you know, to bring in somebody to do that work. It involves a lot of stuff, so we only want to use that process when it absolutely and it's laid down in legislation what it, you know, what constitutes a referral. So you would expect those to be fairly few and far between. The other cases that are referred is where practitioners feel there was some multi-agency work in this. It probably doesn't meet the full requirements, but there is some learning to be gained from it. So that's why we look at more. So of the 4 that wouldn't have met the requirements of the full SAR, we may well do.
They get a mini SAR sort of thing.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It wouldn't be a sort of mandatory one, but it would be something where we might have some multi-agency sessions of bringing staff together, or staff who were involved in the situation and looking at what could have been done better, what do we learn from this, so that we're constantly looking at practice to do that learning. So that's one. That's one thing.
Another question, if not, you've got another.
Yes, so can you go first? You go first.
No, I've got one last question, which was just on your reference to the partnership work you're now doing with DWP, which is that the first time? Yeah. Yes. Which is obviously great, given that they are probably a great partner to be able to have earlier recognition or understanding of when maybe a particular person is at risk. So I just wanted to understand how that collaboration is developing at a borough level and whether it's helping to identify and support residents earlier.
We very much hope that it will. I don't think we're at a, we're not quite at that stage yet. Although I do think that in individual cases there are referrals, but we need to make sure that there's something that systematically is laid down, how they will assure us that they have done that work, because obviously their involvement became a sort of national requirement in terms of learning from SARS. And they have been waiting for some national guidance on how they should kind of move forward. But what I'm really pleased about is that at a local level, they've really engaged with the partnership, really want to be involved, putting themselves forward to be part of the kind of the thinking of the work. So we're really encouraged by that. But we're just waiting to work with them on what their kind of national guidance will be of how we kind of make sure that the work with them and how they account for themselves and are held accountable, that we get that done correctly.
Okay, thanks.
Just kind of switch into the future. You've talked about a likely increase in the population of 16 to 64, and then you talked about funding. And looking at the list of your funders, a lot of those, like us in local government, are going to be seem to be under enormous pressure in the next 2 or 3 years. Any sort of thoughts about future funding? That your report is full of incredibly important work that needs to be done and needs to be funded. Just wondered if you had any thoughts about funding going forward that you want to talk about tonight.
I think where we've got to is that we have had a recent discussion about funding, because I think we recognise that that there are changes in the funding for all of our kind of key partners. And so the first piece of work that we're going to do is to look at what could we do differently? How could we use funding differently? Are there efficiencies that we can bring to bear? And we're going to have those, we're going to have those discussions. And also as well, because we're working with a wide group of partners, both inside and outside, the councils of funding that they've got and how they're using it, and is there anything that we can tap into? So I think we are very conscious of it, that funding could change, and that's something that that we need to adapt to and and think about. But we have started to have those conversations.
Good, that's reassuring. Thank you.
Great. That's questions. Thank you very much. And I was just going to make one comment of a recommendation, which would be great to have more information about the kind of training in the next report. Just to understand the uptake and who.
So the uptake and who and the
exactly. I don't know if anyone else wants to make any other comment.
Very happy to do that.
Thank you, and thank you so much for this report and with the work you do.
Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to agenda item 5, the annual complaints reports. The annual complaints report provides. Sorry, I'm going to ask if anyone else wants to ask a question. Provides an overview of complaints, documents, and investigations into adult care between April 2024 and March 2025. The report highlights how various services within adult social care have performed in line with the principles outlined in legislation and complaints process. I think we have Councillor Josh Redwood and the member who's released back again. just ask if you need to add anything.
But thank you, Chair. Let me just come in. Everyone got excited about the Edwards Square fireworks over there. It's the most exciting. That's what I was at Square. It was made a change on these meetings. Yeah, I'd like to just obviously you've got Louise here who is our expert on complaints processes, but yeah, just like to present the report. I mean, as you'll see, it's quite. I mean, I'm really proud of the team here. Our complaints handling process is improving year on year, especially from the timelines and turnarounds we have for both people from residents and users, but also from members as well. So there's a little section there about members' queries and MU queries as well. There's always more to do, of course, and we're really open to hear your feedback and views on that at the same time. But Louise is, as I said, the expert in this matter, and we're happy to take any questions you have, Chair and Committee.
Great. Do you have anything to add, please?
Well, I can either give you a very brief overview, or if you've actually read it, then I can just go straight to questions.
Yeah, I think we have it. We can go to questions if you're happy with that. Thank you for this report. And in comparison to last year, I know how much of an improvement there's been with fewer complaints and faster response time. So that's real credit to your team. So yeah, I guess it's our job as a committee to kind of look behind the numbers and ensure whether this programme, their progress reflects genuine improvement in the people's experiences as much as we're obviously saying on paper. So I'm going to open up to see who wants to start.
Oh,
Yeah, for sure.
thank you, Chair. I was looking at from page 173 to 188, and I was just wondering what are the key themes in Everton social care complaints this year, and how do they overlap with safeguarding concerns? And my other question would be, how is learning from complaints integrated into staff training and service redesign?
Okay, thank you for that question. So that's a really good question. We don't have very many complaints, do we? There's only 66 complaints per whole year. They're very low level complaints. No complaints at all actually translate into safeguarding because they're such a low level. Now, one of the reasons of this is because, again, when we were doing a remodel for safeguarding, we actually also remodeled the prison quality assurance team. But the quality assurance team is instrumental in going out to our statutory providers, our care homes, and our home care. So as soon as a complaint comes up, they actually go in and actually investigate themselves to actually to provide assurances around actually what's taking place. So many of our complaints are actually related to home care provision in terms of carers going in, whether that may be related to communication issues or communication issues, whether it might be related to delays in actual care and support being put in. So the majority of the complaints sits within the care management complex teams, and indeed crosses over into housing, into home care services as well. So one of the reasons why complaints actually sits in my team is because I'm very keen that we have a very clear understanding about early intervention, prevention, protection, safeguarding. So we spend quite a lot of time really looking at complaints and really sort of making sure that over the last 3 years in particular, that we performance managed complaints, and actually complaints are absolutely what they should be, a complaint and not a safeguarding.
The good thing about that as well, unfortunately, you may know, I mean, we've got 67 complaints, but also 36 compliments as well. So I think that's quite a really good thing for Louise and her team, and obviously led by Bernie as well. But also in our CQC response, we have the best safeguarding in the entire UK. And I think that's something that we all, as a committee and myself and the team, can take away something really, really proud, because things like that, like complaints for safeguarding, would obviously trigger a more serious concern. So I think what we do as a team, culturally, as a council, as a whole, everyone taking part, is to ensure that we have best services for our residents, and getting that kind of seal of approval with these things as the best in the whole country, especially safeguarding. Is I think we can all hold out high for that one.
Yeah, thank you. Good question, but I just wanted to touch on, you said that those complaints are from care workers? Is it some of the complaints that you received from?
So the referrals that come in might be from family members or
About, so how would you integrate that into training and redesigning so that it will be better next time for residents not to really?
okay. So again, alongside the remodelling of complaints and performance management complaints, we also looked at a new model of learning. We followed a little bit along the lines of how we actually learn from our safeguarding. So we absolutely work very, very closely with our commissioning colleagues. So in terms of the new tendering for home care, we analysed our complaints over the previous years and just pulled out those areas of concern. One of them being around much clearer around information sharing across the piece between adult social care and our home care. And so we ensure that also when the tender was looked at, that we had the quality assurance team taking part and asking questions and assessing the questions. So what we try to do is triangulate all the learning coming out of complaints and put that learning into a very clear understanding, supporting commissioners when they're actually been commissioning. So that is how we try, that's how we learn. But then the other part of the learning is part of our learning programme is as these complaints come up, we talk directly to frontline teams, to the managers. We take the complaints down to the teams, we explore, we unpick, we look, we support. And then that's how we ensure, and I think that's one of the reasons why the complaints probably are quite low this year, because if we're going to have some emerging themes, I can tell you now, coming back next year, they will not be at this level. We're already seeing a real increase as we've been talking. But I think what we've managed to show, and in this complaints report, we've really honed down our process to such an extent that this is given quite a good quality complaints process.
Thank you.
Sorry, what did you say we looked at?
So if we're looking at emerging trends, we're definitely seeing an increase in complaints coming through by virtue of the fact that there's an increase in referrals coming through for care assessments. So a 4% increase, but it is definitely increasing.
Can I just ask a very quick question about the ethnicity snapshot? I guess it's just worth noting that there is a disproportionate representation of Black people in the number of complaints, and I don't know what we thought of that. So they make up 19% of the complaints, but they only make up something like 7 or 8% of the population.
Okay, so the ethnicity snapshot of the complaints procedure actually mirrors what's taking place in care and support needs of our residents.
Okay.
So it's not representative of the residents as a whole, of the overall population, but it is absolutely representative of the people receiving care and support needs.
Okay. So there isn't an overrepresentation.
There's not an overrepresentation at all, no.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Not a silly question, but these are statutory complaints, and that means it's gone through a certain process. Forms have been submitted, and I guess I had a case with Gareth, and I know what I'm talking about here. I mean, I had something had obviously gone wrong for a resident. It wasn't a formal complaint, but something had happened, and we're still unpicking it. Won't go into what it was, but it just made me wonder: how do we capture these sort of less formal complaints? Because obviously 66 is not very much, but we as councillors do get, this has gone wrong, this doesn't quite work, and hopefully we sort those things out. But how can we capture those sorts of informal?
It's a really good question. So obviously we have this, obviously Louise will speak as the subject matter expert of the statutory complaints, but as you will see, we've got member queries. We had 68 queries from councillors.
Yes.
Raising that up. Now that's not a formal. Councillors haven't gone in and filled out the official complaints form because we've got a way in already through Louise, through Gareth, or through whoever to raise a concern. So we've captured that on the report, which is at page 185 for those in the report to say that 68 councillors have actually.
But those other things.
Yeah.
before, right, not necessarily to look at answers to that.
Yes. Sorry, Jared.
But there's a difference, isn't there, between problem solving
Yeah.
and a complaint.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of our casework is problem solving.
Yeah.
And if we don't solve the problem, which hopefully we do a lot of the time, then it may come to a formal complaint. So I think there's a distinction between what I just said, problem solving, and something gone horribly wrong that's a complaint.
But I guess this is a statutory report, right? We have to do this. We have to do this. I guess what I'm asking is, beyond this report that we have to do, there are other things that are happening, and people have, either we solve the problem or we don't. How do we capture those? How do we really get a feel for what's going on beyond these statutory complaints? Beyond this report.
So one of the things that the customer engagement team do actually is attend contract monitoring meetings. And one of the questions they need to ask the customer engagement is asking to either the home care provider or the care home, tell me a little bit about your complaints. What complaints are going on, which the resident is actually given directly to, and that's what I'd like to capture a little bit more. I want to make sure that the residents are aware of the fact that they actually can come into the council to make a complaint, because I don't think they're always aware of this. So we do a lot of information raising awareness around the fact that it's not always, you don't always have to go to that care home. You don't always have to go to that home care provider to raise a concern. So I think that's what you're talking about. But we do get to hear about the concerns all through contract monitoring, all through the quality assurance team going out and just talking to people and just finding out, how's your day been, or talking to families as well. So we do capture where there is a concern, and then we support people to use the complaints procedure. And that's one of the reasons why I think you'll definitely see an increase next year.
Also, what Louise does at my briefings, I think every month, we discuss all the complaints that have come in. So I can ask all the similar questions that you're asking, I guess, but to Louise direct, just in terms of kind of what's anything's gone wrong, why is this one potentially not answered in time? We've got a lot of complaints from ex-council. Why do you think that is? Is there a concern in their ward? So we would kind of go through that every so often anyway. Obviously it's not an official report, but it's just flagging up, just to try to capture those things that you mentioned, and that may kind of slip through the things somewhat.
Yeah, I guess the thing is that I wouldn't want to sort of say, obviously it's, you guys do a great job, it's a great department, a lot of people are very, very happy with services, but I wouldn't want to think that we're sitting here going, well, only 66 people complain, everything is, and I know you don't think that, but I guess there's how do we really capture that and make sure that we see it beyond these formal processes.
So Gareth has got a point.
That's good. So let's jump in a bit on that. Just a couple of things on that. One is the complaints process, the distinction between, I suppose, members' inquiries and the complaints process, and it's just dealing with the problem. I think it's partly kind of what you're asking about. The complaints process is really helpful in a lot of ways because it's got the process to it, so there's accountability. For us, it creates a time scale for us to be able to reply, so we can do the work thoroughly. However, when there's something urgent that comes up, like the sort of thing that we've been dealing with this week, and we just need to go and fix it, and it's not officially a complaint yet, we also kind of capture those and don't lose those. And so, as Louisa said, where there's learning across commissioning and contracts, as with this one and quality assurance, that happens as part of our joint team working. But in addition, we absolutely notice where there's a pattern of those sorts of things, particularly if it's to do with one organisation, and it's then a cumulative issue that we need to deal with in a slightly different way. So it's a different mechanism from complaints, but it still provides us with a way to address problems.
That's really helpful. Thank you.
I was just going to ask a question on timeliness versus quality, just to have a bit more understanding of it. And timeliness is very impressive, but I just to get a bit more perspective. Obviously, speed doesn't always equal happiness, and just understand sort of responses from are we meeting residents' sort of expectations, not just timeliness in complaints, I guess, to get a bit more understanding of what you're feeling.
I think, arguably 67 complaints, that's 67 too many, because there's 67 people that haven't had a good service or haven't received something that they hoped they had received from this council.
But in terms of the specifics, again, Louise is probably better for her.
So that's a really great question, isn't it? Because you don't want speed and you sort of then got
I
some
mean,
lack of
it's
quality.
great to see it, but it just worries me that people,
So the good news is the fact that is this. So 97% hit our targets within 10 days. We're doing an awful lot of work with heads of service around quality. What does a good complaint response look like? And I think that's paid dividends. There's also been no ombudsman cases this year at all, and I think that's something that's quite interesting as well, particularly now as the compensation for ombudsman has actually increased up and is more right some. What we test the actual complaints that come through. The directors have an overview of the actual complaint. So I think what you're seeing is a much tighter oversight of all the written complaints that are coming through, and I think that showed dividends now as to what you're seeing. But we are only dealing with 67 at the moment, so I think it's about managing that as the volumes increase, and I think that's where the challenges are going to be now and in the next 12 months.
No, and what my follow-up is going to be, but I don't know, maybe you just answered it, is just in terms of that, are we doing follow-up calls post-complaint to understand how people felt about just as a learning? I'm only involved there smaller in terms of learning from that.
That's a really interesting question, which we asked ourselves an awful lot, and the answer is no.
Yeah.
Because unlike in safeguarding, you don't want to open up a complaint again.
Yeah.
So we don't follow up. There needs to be a mechanism whereby we get feedback. But the feedback, I think, is in the compliments, which actually sometimes do actually mirror the number of complaints that are coming through. So we are trying to collect our compliments much more now than we ever used to. But we don't, and I don't think anybody would actually go and ask after the event how it went. But so we collect it through the compliments.
I thought also what we do see, I mean, I think since this team that Louise leads is, sets the precedent, so it's a really good precedent, but we're sharing also across council too. So especially in housing, where the conflict is much significantly higher. And obviously they have much more ombudsman referrals than housing too. And I think the housing committee looks at that, I think overseas looks at that as well. So we are sharing our way of as ASC into across council section, just to see how the rest of the council can improve as well. And again, I think that's a testament to this team as well, ensuring that you get the right responses in a reasonable time, and people are left content, because if they're not left content, they will complain again. I think that's what we're trying to say in that regard. So
just quickly, and it's maybe not a question, but obviously the falling complaints, as we said, is great. The one bit of data that could have been quite helpful, maybe for next time, and maybe I should flag that in a pre-meeting, is just whether we could have the complaint rates shown relative to the total number of service users. So whether it's sort of per 1,000 people supported, so we can kind of have a better understanding of sort of whether the fall reflects real improvement rather than sort of lower volumes in the future. I think that would be great. And
really just information that the compliments, are they compliments on the way you dealt with complaints, or are they just general compliments? So if you dealt with a complaint, you say fantastic, thank you very much, you dealt with it really well, or is it
you're correct
without a complaint, we gave you good service?
No, it's a compliment on how a social worker has actually dealt with a problem. So it's not related to a complaint.
Right.
Some of them are actually, though. Some of them we do get, the customer engagement team, individual staff members do actually get thank you for supporting you through this difficult time. We appreciate the help you get. So it's a little bit of a mix of the two, but it's not all related to complaints.
And do you prompt a compliment, or is it natural?
Oh no, we don't prompt that. Like, will you give us a compliment, please? No, we
Or
don't.
will you give us a rating?
No, okay, okay.
It's we as councils, we never get them, so we'll just hit this down.
just another question too. What success have we had in joint investigations?
So that's a very good question, actually. We work increasingly closely with housing. And clearly we've got another ombudsman, so it's more alignment and coordination with our housing colleagues rather than actually a joint investigation.
Yeah.
So we have more and more of these coming to light, and this is an emerging theme. And so we have my managers work very closely with case managers in housing, and there's a lot of joint meetings taking place. But we don't produce a joint complaint. It's an alignment, but it's not necessarily a joint complaint. So they are a very challenging area of work. So in terms of success, I think the success is that we're working well together. Whether the outcome is upheld or not, I think it's very easy to say so.
I just wanted to ask a question about communication. So for the lessons learned, two of the lessons learned relate to communications. One is stuff going into junk mail, and the other is somebody being away and not responding.
Yes.
So I just wanted to ask you about how thoroughgoing your response to that is. I can see that you have responded some way. So, for example, it's all very well saying to people, you need to check your junk mail regularly, but people forget after doing it once, unless you really say it's a weekly duty that you check your junk mail. So have you gone as far as that? And with the somebody who wasn't there, I mean, it happens because people forget to put their out of office on, which should be a disciplinary offence, or because they're sick and they don't come into work, and then somebody's sort of trying to engage with them and they don't hear. How do we deal with that? Because often the people who are complaining don't really want to push it and sort of find someone else to respond. They need to be put to make their complaint and not put off.
Yeah, thank you for those questions. So in relationship to both of them, it's not just a simple email, please check your junk mail. So we actually did a very large scale comms, not only in RBKC, but also across in Westminster as well. And we followed it up. And in fact, I have spoken about, things in junk mail an awful lot. So it's, as I said, it's making sure when we have heads of service meetings through our governance process that we're constantly reminding heads of service to talk about it in their team meetings, and then to again talk about it.
The solution is not to have junk mail. It's to instruct IT not to
have done that. So from an IT perspective, that's a little bit more tricky to actually manage. So we have done a large scale training, and indeed around that for the issue of people being either on sick leave or annual leave and things just being delayed. Again, that is it's more than just a reminder, isn't it? It's just simply not acceptable. And so again, we talk about it at head of service level and then cascade it down again. And it's something we repeat on a frequent basis. And in fact, that's come up once. It hasn't come up again. And I guess the proof will be in the fact that hopefully you won't get any more complaints like that, either in junk mail or otherwise. I'm sure you will go and check.
I've done it myself, so I'm not without sin, but thank you.
My last question was just going to be about how accessible we feel like the complaint system is to those who might be digitally excluded, and some of our digitally vulnerable residents who are part of this process.
Okay. Well, interestingly, the new IT and AI hasn't quite hit our system at all. It's very much a question of picking up the phone and talking to people. So in fact, the customer engagement team are brilliant at doing that, and that's exactly what they do. As soon as a complaint can come in, and it might come in by email, but also in fact it can come in through mail as well. They will literally pick up the phone and talk to people, and they build up a relationship throughout the whole of the 10 days, and even afterwards over the phone. We are actually reviewing our booklets. We've got a lot of hard copies for our booklets, and we're going to make sure that they are compliant as a public body to accessibility, and they will then be placed in various community events and libraries, and we'll do a communication rating awareness around that. But I think we probably could be better than we are. But I think that's something that we are addressing as we're just reviewing and bedding down this reasonably new process. so we can actually support the older generation as they're coming up.
And is it one of the areas which I guess is maybe due to the transport to become much more digital?
Well, that's a very good question. I think the answer is yes, but I couldn't tell you the detail at the moment. I do know that there's going to be all mail that comes through is going to be digitalised, but that's slightly different, isn't it? That still doesn't stop you from picking up the phone and talking to people. I think that's something that we encourage, and we also encourage people to come in as well and talk to us if they feel that they need to.
Thank you. Anyone else?
That's fine.
Okay, so I was just going to make a recommendation on that particular figure for the next report and on Melbourne residents. Yeah, I understand it. I don't know if anyone else wants to make a recommendation for next year.
I don't know how likely this is, but how personalized is safeguarding? Can you make it personalized?
Making safeguarding personal is central to everything we do in safeguarding. So we always talk to the person when the incident has occurred to ask them what they want for the next, and they remain central to the whole of the investigation.
Under any circumstances?
Under the majority of circumstances, if they have a mental capacity act or cognitive impairments, then we would be asking them questions that they can answer, and they would get an advocate or a family member, and we'd ask the family member what they would consider. But that would be done under somebody's best interest. So making safeguarding personal under, yes, any circumstances is good practice.
Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
And well done for your work because it's how much I have improved. Moving on to agenda item 6, which is the work programme report. This is a report. It's an update of Select Committee's work programme for the year 2025-2026. Select Committee members are recommended to discuss the work programme, including the items on the new model of the Integrated Care Board and of organisation manager. So if anyone got any comments, we've obviously got our next meeting on the 26th of November, which is going over the budget. And then the next one we have is February and March. Which are pretty the details.
Once we know about the settlement,
About the settlement.
the manager settlement,
Yes.
which we presumably won't know until November.
November.
So is that something we ought to come back to, just look at the implications for social care and health in the new year?
Yes, that would fall into February. What?
It's something that you could do. I would say though, the February meeting, there's already 3 reports down for that, and it's very much focused on the health partners as well. And as Councillor Knight has said, an additional report there on the new model ICB and the reorganisation change. So I think that would be quite a big meeting, just with those items.
I guess the only thing I would say on that is that also going to be an OSC, and I mean those reports would be going to OSC because of the
and there'll also be there's a budget working group as well, which will be looking at those sorts of issues as well.
So that will be before the budget.
Yeah, I think it will be before the budget working group. Maybe we need to see what happens in November and then see if I mean, it feels like February is it. I want to suggest on that one, but I know I completely agree, Jared.
I mean, I think the thing with the November meeting is that that's looking at the budget proposals that have already been published. So that would be as it is. But you're right, there may be implications for the budget overall as a result of funding suspect. The council knows about it. Yeah. So I think you're right that it needs.
So we've been hearing a message that's going to be pretty drastic.
Yeah.
If it is going to be pretty drastic, we ought to be aware of what that means.
Yeah.
we could, as a department, offer to provide a kind of offline briefing to the committee and members about kind of any exceptions that are coming out as a result of the settlement when it arrives.
Yeah.
And what we anticipate that might mean is any different for what we've got in our forecast next year already. It's just as a kind of quick highlight for you as a result of
Yeah.
So essentially from where we've been in November, any differences that would, when do you think the time-wise that would be if we were to
predicting that when the settlement comes out isn't always great, but it's usually kind of some point just before Christmas. So we'd probably be talking about early January.
Okay. So we wouldn't probably hear from you till early January if we had a briefing call, and then we could see whether it's something that we need to add to the agenda and make a decision at that point. If we're happy with that.
The final budget will also go to the leadership team and then to full council. So even though you look at the budget in November, there's a process after that, and there may be an opportunity to feedback.
Yeah. Okay. Does that sound good? If we
it's not so much the figure, it's not the figures per se, it's the impact of that.
Yeah.
And how that's going to be managed.
Services and
Yeah, I mean, my only point though is that I think we just need to be a bit mindful that it's getting complicated. There's another scrutiny structure involved as well, the budget working group, which will be looking at these issues as well. So I think it's fine to do all of this, but we just need to coordinate with them as well.
Yeah, okay. Well, that's
a question of time, is it? When is that budget scrutiny?
So that starts in December and then runs up until the budget assessing process. The budget assessing meeting in March.
So when will we discuss that at this committee?
the budget that essentially is going to the budget working group November, the next November meeting. But that's obviously not with the impact of what we're talking about.
So this committee will look at the budget proposals as they are in November, and then the budget working group starts work post that, and then picks up the implications of the settlement and everything which is going on around finance settlement from that point as well.
My point still stands. When is that going to be discussed in this committee? The implications of it on adult social care?
Well, at the moment we don't have that in.
It's not scheduled at the moment, but if it's something, I mean, it's not to do an update briefing when we know what the assessment is in the new year.
And then we make a call from that point as to whether we need to have a meeting. Which time-wise does that make? That's the only option we have.
It would be unless the March meeting is before the budget setting meeting, but probably February would be better. But like I said, you'll have to balance it with the items that we've already got.
I think the budget's quite important.
I was going to say, I think it would just have to be a very long meeting, and we'd have to appreciate the fact that it was.
And maybe the issue here is not so much, going back to what I said, not so much what the figures are. Those will be decided outside of the committee in a way.
Yeah.
It's the implications. So that could wait till March, wait till other meetings, because we're not going to be able to have much impact on the figures themselves.
Yeah.
But as members of the committee, we ought to be cognizant of the impact of whatever the figures are, if they're going to be as drastic as what we're being told they will be.
Yeah.
So the figures that go into the budget are one thing, and that's the scrutiny committee, or the scrutiny will be looking at that, and the budget working group. I'm more interested in what it means on the ground.
Yeah. Well, why do we agree to have that update in January, and then we can decide as to what meeting that might go into if we wanted to go into a meeting.
Yeah, I think you can either bring it February or the March meeting.
Well, the March one's looking thinner than the February one.
It's more capacity. That's what it was kept deliberately lighter to allow for the new item to be much later in the year.
Yeah. Okay. Everyone's happy with that. To add. That concludes the meeting. Thank you everyone for your time. Thank you. Sign this.